The corruption of mankind in the generations after Adam, the world grew rapidly. Families expanded, settlements formed, and the earth became filled with people. At first, humanity remembered God. They passed down stories of Eden, of walking with God, of His holiness and His justice. But as time passed, something changed. The world that began with promise slipped slowly into darkness. 1. Growth without guidance, people multiplied, but spiritual devotion did not. The further humanity moved from Eden, the more they ignored God's ways. The sense of reverence that early generations had held started to fade. Skills increased, cities expanded, and human ambition grew. But alongside all this development came a dangerous shift. People began to trust themselves more than God. Self-interest replaced humility. Desire replaced discipline. 2. The sons of God and the daughters of men. As society expanded, a troubling pattern emerged. The Bible describes a group called the Sons of God who saw that the women on earth were beautiful. They took any they wanted as wives, ignoring God's boundaries. This decision wasn't simple marriage, it symbolized a deep rebellion. It showed a human race crossing lines God had set. It represented a complete disregard for obedience or moral restraint. Their children became known as the Nephilimite men, who gained reputation and power. But these figures, instead of bringing honor to the world, amplified its rebellion. Strength without righteousness only increased corruption. 3. God's warning: time is running. Out God saw where humanity was heading and issued a divine limit. My spirit shall not strive with man forever. His days shall be 120 years. It was a warning, not an immediate punishment. God gave humanity time 120 years to turn back. They didn't. Humanity chose desire over discipline, violence over peace, pride over truth. The world became loud with noise, but empty of righteousness. 4. A world filled with wickedness. As the years went on, corruption hardened into a global culture. Wickedness was no longer hidden or occasionally it became normal. Violence spread. People harmed each other freely. Power was misused. Greed drove decisions. Every part of society reflected selfishness. The Bible describes the condition clearly. Every imagination of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. This wasn't a world with a few problems. It was a world consumed. Humanity no longer remembered God. They no longer cared about right or wrong. The earth, once good and full of potential, became stained with cruelty and injustice. 5. God's grief. God looked at creation, the same creation He once called very good, and saw what it had become: the violence, the rebellion, the moral decay, the refusal to turn from sin. The Bible says God was grieved, not surprised, not caught off guard, grieved. He regretted what humanity had done to His world. The pain of a wounded creator filled His heart. Humanity had walked away from the purpose they were made for. 6. The decision to judge God declared a devastating verdict. I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the earth. This was more than punishment. It was a necessary reset. If the corruption continued unchecked, no righteousness would remain. The world would become permanently broken. A flood global, powerful cleansing was the only solution that could stop the collapse of creation. But even in judgment, God preserved mercy. 7. One man stood out throughout all the darkness. One life shone differently. Noah, while the world embraced wickedness, Noah chose integrity. While others ignored God, Noah listened. He wasn't perfect, but he was devoted. The Bible says, Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his generation, and he walked with God. Noah stood against the culture around him. His life provided the thread of righteousness that allowed humanity to survive. Because of his character, God showed him favor. 8. The plan for preservation. God revealed his plan to Noah. A flood would wipe out the corruption, but Noah and his family would be saved. He was instructed to build an ark, massive, detailed, and prepared to house animals and humans for a new beginning. The assignment was heavy. It required decades of commitment. The world watched him with mockery and confusion, but Noah worked steadily, obeying every instruction. For 120 years, the ark stood as a warning. For 120 years, society had a chance to change. But corruption had hardened their hearts. No one listened. 9. The stage set for judgment as Noah completed the ark. The world around him continued sinking deeper into violence and sin. The disconnect between Noah's obedience and the world's wickedness became more obvious each day. Corruption was no longer an individual issue, it was global. And the moment came when God said, "The end of all flesh has come before me." The world that began with Adam full of hope and potential was about to be swept clean. Not erased forever, but reset for a new chance. Noah, his family, and the creatures chosen for preservation would step into a future built on obedience rather than corruption.